Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we'll be going over Chapter 5, Measuring Results and Behaviors. Here we go. So, a couple key questions that we're going to go over in the lecture today are, where should each individual focus efforts? What are the expected objectives, and how do we know how well the results were achieved? So, we're going to go over, employee behaviors at work as they relate to the outlined objectives and how these behaviors are measured, how the results are measured. So we'll go over a couple different methods of measurement and different types of behaviors that are seen in the workplace. So here we go. Okay, sorry. Let's get on track here. All right, measuring results. We're going to have to look at accountabilities, objectives, and performance standards. So accountabilities are broad areas of a job for which an employee is responsible for producing results. So as the name would suggest, these are what the employee is held accountable for within his or her role inside an organization. Then we have objectives. These are statements of important and measurable outcomes. These are what the employees are working towards to achieve. Okay, and then we have the performance standards, and this is really the metric that's used to evaluate how well employees have achieved objectives. You'll see this referred to in the text as the yardstick that's used to evaluate performance and achievement as it relates to different objectives. Okay. So how do we determine accountabilities? It's the first bullet on our measuring results list. How do we determine accountabilities? Well, we need to first collect information about the job. We do that by looking at a job description. You probably run a job analysis, or not run one, but conduct a job analysis like we've talked about in earlier chapters to collect information that you need to outline accountabilities. You're going to want to, as you would in a job analysis, determine the importance of tasks or clusters of tasks. Okay, so you're going to look at the percentage of employees' time spent performing each task or each task cluster, the impact on the unit or the department, that unit or department's mission or objectives. If those clusters of tasks are not performed correctly or adequately, and then you want to look at the consequences of error. So what occurs when what occurs within the organization overall when poor performance occurs on the part of the employee. Okay, these are all things you're going to want to consider when you are determining the accountabilities. Okay, objectives. So objectives are used to identify outcomes. When you know the objective, you know what outcome you are working towards. Okay, and when achieved, these objectives have a dramatic impact on the organization. Obviously, if they're achieved, the organization will see success, and if organizations fail or if employees fail to meet objectives, you're going to see the organization be hurt or in some way, some kind of negative impact on the organization. So what are some characteristics of good objectives? Well, they are specific and clear. They have to be challenging. They're agreed upon. This is the collaboration aspect that we've been talking about throughout the course. Collaboration between upper level supervisors and the lower, not to be derogatory, but lower level employees. Okay, they're agreed upon. They have to be significant. They have to mean something. Employees have to, well, not just employees, but everybody, employees, supervisors, executives, they have to understand what these objectives mean for the organization. They have to understand the significance and see that they are in fact significant according to in relation to the big picture. Okay, they're prioritized. So the most important objectives are stated as such. So we say this objective is more important than this objective, thus it takes priority. So objectives should be prioritized in that way. So people know what's important. They're bound by time. So you don't want to leave an objective completely open-ended and subject to too much interpretation in terms of when it should be finished. There should be a certain time set to have this objective completed. They have to be achievable. They can't be too too over the top, too difficult to achieve with the skill set that an organization has among its employees. So let's if you or excuse me, one of the characteristics I mentioned was challenging. Okay, objectives should be challenging, but we also want them to be achievable. Okay, so challenging but achievable. Fully communicated. Again, this has to do with significance. So we need to communicate to, or the organization should communicate to the employees, supervisors, whether it's supervisors communicating to employees, executives communicating to supervisors, or maybe employees have a certain goal that they want supervisors or executives to implement. Okay, a certain objective to implement. So objectives need to be fully communicated between all levels of the organization. They should also be flexible. Okay, so I'm sure everyone here has gone into a project and something unexpected happens and the objective has to be changed, has to be tweaked slightly. So if there's no room for tweaking, then people are going to get frustrated, or the task or the objective is going to fail. So objectives should be flexible in some way and limited in number. We don't want to overwhelm anybody. So with this, maybe do some reading on, I think the textbook actually expands on this a bit more, this limited in number point, but maybe look into cognitive load. This can be something that has to do with cognitive load. You don't want to overwhelm people with too many objectives that need to be completed in the near future. Okay. So let's move on from objectives to performance standards. Okay. So when we talk about standards, we are talking about aspects or characteristics of performance objectives. So the quality, the quantity, and the time. And you can see each of these points defined here. It's certainly important to consider each of these points when formulating any objective, any and all objectives. Okay. Standards must include. Okay, when we're determining performance standards, they must include a verb. So an action word. You're doing something. The desired result, the desired outcome, a due date. Remember, we wanted to set a time with our objectives, a time, a due date, a time to be completed, and an indicator that outlines the level of quality or quantity, or sometimes it can be both quality and quantity. An indicator that outlines the quality and or quantity that is expected with this, whatever you may be doing, whether it's a task or it's a larger project or it's some sort of organizational change. You're going to want to outline the quality or quantity that needs to be achieved with this project. Okay, so just to review: a verb, an action word, the desired result, a due date, and an indicator that speaks to the quality and quantity. These are all aspects of performance standards that need to be considered. Okay. Now, let's move on to measuring behaviors. Okay, so when we consider the method of measurement concerning employee behaviors, we're going to want to first identify competencies, identify indicators. Okay, these indicators are a bit different than the indicators we just discussed as they relate to performance standards. These are now moving towards behaviors. Okay, so identify indicators as they relate to behaviors, and we're going to want to choose a measurement measurement system. So to speak to the first point, identifying competencies. Okay. When identifying competencies, you're going to want to measure clusters of KSAs. Okay, so you want to look at knowledge, skills, and abilities, and you want to see how these KSAs relate to results. Okay, how will these knowledge, skills, and abilities lead to results, or what does it look like when a lack of knowledge, skills, and abilities exists? How close does one come to uh, uh, achieving the desired results? What does their behavior look like when an employee? What does an employee's behavior look like when he or she is not exactly up to par in terms of the competencies and the KSAs involved? Okay, so you're going to want to look at these KSAs to determine exactly what competencies are needed to perform, to to uh, to exhibit the behaviors required to complete a task, to achieve an objective. Okay, and let's now look at competencies. Okay, or excuse me, indicators. Indicators are going to have to do with observable behaviors. So when observing an employee behavior, you're going to want to have indicators that you can look at that employee or those groups of employees and say, okay, this employee or those groups of employees are doing this job correctly. They're behaving in a way that's going to achieve the result I want. Okay, um, so indicators are very important to be drawn up and laid out beforehand, so you know if behaviors are in fact are being exhibited in the way that you want them to. You want to know if behaviors are actually um, conducive to the result that you want, to the objective that you want to achieve. Okay. Measurement system. Okay, let's move on to measurement system. This was the third point in our measuring behaviors section of the chapter. So choosing a measurement system to measure behaviors. Two types of systems are outlined here. We have the comparative system. Basically, that's pretty self-explanatory. With this kind of system, you're comparing employees to each other. And then you have an absolute system. Okay, and this compares employees to pre-specified performance standards. So performance standards that have already been laid out, whether they've been laid out by looking at literature beforehand to see what performances, to see what behaviors should be seen, or whether you've done a past project that you've seen positive behaviors. Maybe you've seen positive behaviors in that project and you want to see them again in this next project. Okay, so an absolute system already has these standards for behaviors put in place, whereas a comparative system, you're simply comparing employees with each other. Okay, so that's the basic difference between comparative and absolute, and let's get into them in a little bit more detail here. Okay. Advantages of comparative systems: easier to explain. They're fairly straightforward. They identify top as well as the underperformers, so this can be an advantage when you're doing selection, or if you're solicited by the government to provide some proof as to the validity of your selection system or your performance evaluation system. This can be really useful. Okay, and it better controls for biases and errors found in the absolute system. So leniency, severity, central tendency. Go ahead and take a look in your text for the definitions of these. I don't want to take too long explaining these. Trying to keep these videos a bit shorter, and we're already up to about 15 minutes so far. Okay, Disadvantages of comparative systems. The rankings might not be specific enough. Okay, so that might be a problem. There's no information on the relative distance between employees. Okay, so with comparative systems, we're just ranking employees. It doesn't really give you any information as to the distance or the space between the gap in performance between employees. It's simply telling you this one performed better than that one, but not by how much. So this is a disadvantage of comparative systems. Okay. So different types of comparative systems: simple rank order, alternation rank order, paired comparisons, relative percentile, and forced distribution. Again, I don't want to take too long explaining all these, so please go ahead and look into these in a bit more detail in your textbook. They're all fairly straightforward, not too complicated, just similar systems, but with some tweaks between them. So go ahead and refer to your textbook for that. I don't want to just rehash these all for you and tell you everything you may have read or are going to read again. So absolute systems, essays, behavior checklists, critical incidents, graphic rating scales. These have the tendency to be a bit more detailed than comparative systems. These don't simply rank employees in terms of their behaviors or in terms of their performance. These are a bit more qualitative in nature. Okay, not so much though. I mean, something like a behavior checklist, you're simply checking behaviors off of a predetermined list. Critical incidents, you're just looking for specific behaviors that lead to success or lead to failure. Predetermined behaviors that lead to success or lead to failure. These critical behaviors. While it's not simply comparative, not simply ranking, it is quantitative. It does have a quantitative approach to it. It's just a bit more in the qualitative direction than comparative systems. So yeah, I encourage you to please take a look at the different types of comparative systems and absolute systems. If I were to explain all of these, it would probably take me about another half an hour. So not going to do that right now. Okay, measuring performance. All right, so we looked at the different types of methods. They differ in terms of practicality. Okay, the time and effort involved to use these different methods of measurement, these different methods of measuring behavior and performance, and usefulness. So are they quantifiable? Can they actually be used to improve performance and improve behavior the next time around or in the long haul? Okay, so and as you would think, different methods, whether they be in the umbrella of comparative systems or absolute systems, have different situations in which they should be used. So some situations might call for a certain type of comparative system, some situations might call for a certain type of absolute systems. Okay. All right, last slide, quick review. So we looked at measuring results. Okay, we looked at those three main points that have to do with measuring results: the identifying accountabilities, setting objectives for your employees or for your organization, determining the standards of performance. And then we also looked at measuring the behaviors. So behaviors lead to results, but again, as we discussed in other chapters, behaviors, doing the behavior correctly or exhibiting the right behavior, the correct behavior, doesn't always lead to positive results. Again, there are other factors that may be acting on the employee, whether it be the organization. Maybe the organization has some boundaries put in place that keep employees from achieving the objective, from obtaining the desired results, even if they're exhibiting the proper behaviors. Okay, so there may be things that are out of the employee's control that result in the behaviors being correct, but the results not being achieved. Okay, so measuring behaviors and measuring results are completely different. All right, so with behaviors, you want to identify the competencies first. Okay, then you're going to identify the indicators. Okay, these let you know that the behaviors, or the desired behaviors are actually taking place. Okay, and then you're going to choose the measurement system that's best for the situation and the environment. Okay, you're going to choose the measurement system that's best to measure the behaviors that you are looking for. Okay, that's about it. See y'all next week.